with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. And Cassie, could we have roll call, please?
Trustee Rhodey? Here. Trustee Belt? Here. Trustee Krasovich? Here. Trustee Roberts?
Here.
Trustee Grabowski?
Here.
Heather is excused. And President Knutson?
Here. Tonight, we have no public hearings. Item 3 is approval of the regular village board meeting dated May 2nd, 2023. I hope everyone's had a chance to look them over. Are there any questions, comments, or additions to the way they are presented this evening?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 2nd village board meeting as presented.
Second, Grabowski.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is hereby carried. Minutes are adopted. Citizen comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to share their opinions with board members on any topic they choose. However, due to Wisconsin open meeting laws, the board is not able to answer questions or respond to your comments. All comments should be directed to the board. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Speakers are asked to please use the podium and state your name and address for the record. Is there anybody here that would like to make a comment at this time? Okay, we're going to move on to ordinances. We have none. Resolution, possible action on Resolution 2023-05, a resolution establishing an annual transient commercial lodging short-term rental license fee related to Chapter 40.471 of the Village of the Pewaukee Municipal Code. Scott, do you want to take this, or Cassie?
I can take it. Since we adopted our short-term lodging ordinance and we now have a form for people to fill out, we now have a fee that they need to pay so that they can get their building and fire, police background check, all that done. So we're proposing $200.
And that would cover the associated fees with the inspections that would be required by that.
Any questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
Question in regard to commercial lodging in residential districts. Strictly what we are zoning residential districts, or are the downtown condominiums also covered?
So the issue would be how the property is being used, and it is in residential districts only. Those are residences downtown as well, but those are not short-term rentals unless they're turned around and used as such, in which case they would be. So if they are just used as they were originally designed, which is, you would own or lease them on a year basis, for example, then this really wouldn't apply to the situation. It's really dealing with a short-term rental arrangement, which could occur there or anywhere else that's in a residential district.
But if a condo owner is renting out their unit,
As long
it
as
should
it is-
apply then?
Yes, if it is a residentially zoned area. So yes, that would be the case.
Okay, and the only reason I'm looking is that you're looking at those condos on West Wisconsin Avenue.
Sure.
Both buildings that we have there are both highly desired areas during the summer. And I know there is activity that takes place. So I just wanted to make sure that those are also covered by this requirement also.
So I'm not sure how those individual properties are zoned, Scott, maybe you know, but.
Yeah, the base zoning is B2, but it's mixed use through, I believe, a conditional use grant that does allow for the residential use within the B2 zoning district.
I guess there are some gray areas, like my house, for example, is zoned residential within the B2 district. So,
Yeah, and
some oddities
yeah,
throughout.
there are some other residentially used properties along Oakton Avenue that the zoning's B2, but they were residentially used when the village changed the zoning in 1999 to go from residential to the B2 zoning. So those are, the uses are continuing as a legal
Legal
non-conforming.
non-conforming, right?
So they would be under this,
So I don't have the ordinance in front of me. I think the section that we created, though, was intended to deal with residentially zoned areas. And so I don't know that if you have a legal non-conforming, that's really going to be a situation that's going to be applicable. And this is just about the fee for that. Maybe that's a discussion we can have independently of this, because that's really not what we're discussing this
Okay,
evening.
all right, all right.
Well, would the effect of this be the same if we, in that first whereas statement, we remove the words "in residential districts" and simply had it where the operation of transient commercial lodging?
Like it would.
But having any adjustment to the ordinance, aside from establishing this fee, is not on your agenda right now. So it's not something I think we can have a conversation about tonight.
Yeah, the section referenced to 40.471C2 is the section of
I
the
see.
ordinance that calls for a fee to be established by the village board.
It's referencing the chapter 40.471. Got it. Okay.
any other questions or comments? Is there a motion to adopt or whatever? Somebody have a motion to make?
Question before we do that. If we were to go and make any modifications to 40.471 to be all-encompassing, would we have to come back and change this, or would that automatically change based on 40.471 changing?
Right.
Yes, okay.
40.4 something when changing, this applies to licenses under that section. So yes, if the
Okay.
scope increased, that fee would apply to it as well.
Okay, then I will make a motion to adopt a resolution 2023-05 establishing the annual transit lodging short-term rental license fee as presented.
Second, Krasovich.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Resolution 2023-05 is hereby adopted. Possible action on resolution number 2023-06, a resolution recognizing the retirement of Dave Dorn from the Public Works Department. I have the resolution right here. Are there any questions or comments as the way it is presented this evening? If not, before I read it into the record, I would like to have a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Rhodey.
Second, Grabowski.
Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is hereby carried. I know you were waiting for this, right? Resolution 2023-06, a resolution recognizing the retirement of Dave Dorn from the Public Works Department. Whereas Dave Dorn began his employment with the Village of Pewaukee on March 19, 1979 as a Public Works crew member, and whereas Dave Dorn's dedicated service to the Village of Pewaukee has included snow plowing miles of village roads at any time of the day, any day of the week, including holidays, planting of numerous village street trees, and trimming of many of those same trees, asphalt patching, and repair of every road in the village, street sweeping every street in the village, maintaining the Forest Hill Cemetery, and clearing countless loads of lake weeds from Pewaukee Lake Beach. Now therefore, be it resolved that the village board of the Village of Pewaukee, Waukesha County, Wisconsin, hereby extends their heartfelt appreciation for the dedication demonstrated by Dave Dorn during his 40+ years of employment with the Village of Pewaukee, dated and approved the 16th day of May 2023. Amen. Thank you so very, very much.
I miss you, thank you.
If I could just say one thing, Dave has been around almost as long as Jeff and I have been around. Really appreciate all the work
Yes.
that you've put in through all the years. Good, and even putting up with some of the issues and floods and everything like that. Really appreciate all that you have done, really do.
Okay, we're gonna go to the next one, is old business, we have none. New business. Discussion, review, and direction on 2023 capital equipment and infrastructure projects and direction on financing. Go right to, or you?
Well, I can kick it off, and
Okay.
we've got a team of people here this evening to help with the subject matter. Obviously, Dan's worked with Jack to put together the roads, the utilities, to try and coordinate that when we're digging a road, we're doing the utilities, so we don't have to come back in a couple of years to dig it up to do utilities. So trying to do it all in a proper order, as well as looking at equipment needs. And then once we get through the discussion on the building equipment and the roads, Brad Vigood from Baird is here to help talk about what are options for financing the projects. So hopefully the staff report made some sense in terms of breaking out the two sections, one being infrastructure, which I use the term infrastructure to talk about the roads, the sewers, sanitary sewer, stormwater, and water utility work, the pipes in the ground. We have the list of roads that was reviewed as part of the budget for 2023 last fall. The dollar amounts that are in the spreadsheet for those separate road projects are the bid numbers that were open last Wednesday. So those are current numbers, slightly higher than what we had for estimates, but those are bids. Each component, the utilities, sir, could you? Each component, the water utility would be paying for the water utility work, sanitary sewer for the sanitary sewer work, same for the stormwater. And then roads, I know we have the transportation utility in place, so depending on form of financing, there could be some discussion, do you want that general debt issuance, or do you want that fully funded through the transportation utility? But I think for purposes of this evening, trying to get direction from the board on the financing package. When you get into the roads or the equipment in the building, there are the components, again, that we talked through last fall. Some of those items related to building maintenance, equipment items, the bucket truck. I think we're looking at about $298,000-300,000 for that, so that seems to be a good number. As well as the computer servers. We had talked last year about the barricades. And I should have put a picture in because I don't know if we all remember what those look like. Those City of Waukesha purchased those, State Fair Park purchased those, easy to move around, stop heavy trucks. So less labor intensive to set up. And then we're working on the first phase of the sanitary sewer lateral fix for Kiwanis Park. Working on the design of that, we'll get that. So that $50,000 is just a plug number at this time because we know it's going to be more than $25,000 given initial indications on that. The HVAC, there was conversations about that last year. As well as the LED lighting upgrade. The lighting upgrade for this facility would bring back immediate savings in terms of utility costs on electric. So on the infrastructure side, I think we're looking at debt financing for all of that work. On the building and equipment side, we'd be looking at this point, possibly use a debt issuance for the bucket truck, given the dollar amount. Or if the board wanted to look at the infrastructure fund, we could look at that as well for that. The other items related to the building, the HVAC, the files, computer server, the barricades, if that's something the board wants to look at, you're looking at the infrastructure funds. Again, we're around 1.2 million on that. Preliminary audit is nearing completion, but I think the auditors are confident that that's a good number to start with for discussion purposes. And as a reminder, those set-aside funds for, we term it the infrastructure, is funds above 40% of the fund balance of the general fund operating budget, set aside to offset debt issuance. So to assist with funding projects on a cash basis in lieu of issuing debt. So that's the purpose of why that was set up in that manner. So, if any questions on the projects, or I know part of the follow-up to this is Dan has on the agenda the award of contract. So we are somewhat tied together on those.
Any questions? I have one, Scott. I see that large area floor scrubber, it was listed, but then there's no money there. Are we not getting it, or?
So those are a lot more expensive than we thought. And as are the forklifts. So we decided that we're probably a lot better off a couple times a year just renting one for a couple $100 each time instead of dropping who knows how much, thousands and thousands on one of those. So we took I think it was 4,000 that we had in there for that, and we put it with the 10,000 for a forklift, because we also found out that what's out there for used forklifts is bleak. And we're not getting a forklift for $10,000 either, even used. So we put those two numbers together and come up with 14 for a forklift, but we really haven't spent any time on it. So the floor scrubber, a great idea, we would have room for it, but to drop that much money on one of those to use a couple times of the year, you know, you're better off spending a few $100s just to rent one a couple times a year.
Makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I just had a question on the HVAC system again, and I know we talked about it a little bit when Trustee Hill was here. Current system is functioning properly?
They're functioning. We have had issues on and off with various components. So we have had some maintenance as recent as this year. And Jack, I don't remember the specifics, but we have been having maintenance more frequently on the system that we have.
Some of the components are fairly pricey. The last one we did was like $2,300. And it's starting to get aged and pricey.
Doesn't take too many of those and you just end up having the cost of a whole new unit.
Sure.
They're close to 20 years old, aren't they?
Yeah, they're original to the building.
Are we doing like-for-like replacements, or are we looking to upgrade the system and change it?
Yeah, we don't have any proposals at this point.
Yeah, the dollar numbers that we have, and I'd have to go back to the report that Facility Services Group put together for us. That's where the numbers are coming from. So I can certainly pull that information together for future discussion. But the numbers that they recommend are from their recommendation on a replacement.
I just looking at how many units we have for a building this size, I feel like with increased efficiency, you might be able to redesign and come up with different equipment. But
And I think the components related to possible use of infrastructures aren't as critical to a decision-making tonight. I think the more critical component is for the debt financing items, so we can get direction and come back to the board with that package, given that the road projects are imminent.
So I guess I have a question. I'm asking for opinions here on this. Are we better off keeping the flexibility by having money in our infrastructure fund and using debt versus using that infrastructure fund up?
I would think for the roads components, debt financing is better. then you have that cash in case of emergencies. And yes, 1.2 million is healthy for cash, but we also have projects for computer servers and some other items that didn't make it in the budget because of levy limits and revenue limits, but those are operational items that we do need to keep current from a functionality standpoint of government.
So it's specifically, I guess, the bucket truck, $300,000. And there's discussion in whether we should finance it or pay for it infrastructure. Is there a recommendation from staff? And I know Brad will go over the options, but.
Yeah, I think it's a piece of equipment we'd have for, what, 15 to 20 years? So I think that financing would, given the life of the equipment.
Okay.
And again, that gives us flexibility if we have a failure of another large capital equipment item to have cash, or look at that financing. And I think Brad might get into this with state trust funds right now. No matter what term, everything is at 5% for an interest rate. But I'm not going to get ahead of Brad's conversation on options for financing.
The only challenge with that, Bob, might be is this bucket truck is like so many of the other trucks where you place your order today, you've got to put some money down, then you wait 18 months to get it, right? And then you have different payments. If we take the loan out, we're paying interest today.
Yeah.
For the course of a couple of years before we even get the truck. And that would be the kind of the downside of that.
Yeah.
You know, because it's costing you to not have it.
Yeah. Dan, are we getting any idea how long it's going to take to actually get delivery on a bucket truck?
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, we can look at the one proposal we have, but I have no doubt that it's at least 12 months.
Really? Okay. Okay.
I presume they have a down payment requirement of some
I
kind?
don't think so.
Okay.
Well, we have one proposal at this point, we're waiting for a second one, but I don't think they had any deposit in the proposal.
Projected delivery date is January of 2025.
18 months.
Like I said, you're paying interest over a long period of time for something you don't even have.
Do we have a guarantee the price ain't gonna jump?
Well, once you lock it in with the order, right?
So the quote that I have is strictly an estimate. They padded it a little bit because they don't have a final number from International for the cabin chassis, as we haven't placed an order yet, and they're fluctuating. They're pretty confident in the upfit equipment is steady. They're not seeing upfit increases like they were. So he thinks he padded it enough to sustain the increase from International.
I mean, hearing it's 2025 to even hear someone reference that, and then now factoring in it's only 18 months away, kind of brings me to my point of if we're going to be taking debt out for road repair, looking at the schedule that you have, and I know you went off of the road grading that was done, you know, however many years ago. But do we really think that Main Street from Prospect to Village Limits is going to last till 2028? I mean, that is brutal right now. Or Glacier Avenue? Bob, Jeff, I'm sure you don't think that's going to last till 27, I think it is. Or wait, Glacier might be only a couple years out. But I just look at it and go, if we're going to be pulling debt, and you're saying, you know, rates are pretty much always going to be at that point, or
Well, state trust is one option.
Okay,
That's,
gotcha.
I don't think that's the option that we're going to be recommending
Okay.
tonight.
but it's like, do we look to advancing some of these projects? Because I just think we're just kind of kicking the can that we're now going to get surprised in now 25 and 26 when we were planning on this stuff for 28.
Yeah, what we're going to be working on before budget season is adding a year or two to this and also looking at future road programs. So I'm going to try and maintain the focus on the projects that we have for 23. We'll be looking at a separate issuance for 24 and possibly 25 projects, but in the meantime, we'll be going through updating numbers. I know there's already an inflation factor built into what Dan has. Looking at out years and adding in, again, when you get out that far, it's going to be a very non-scientific guess as to what costs are going to be, but at least get some,
What they're going to be
Right, at least get some roads on paper so there's an idea,
Right.
and as winters pass, Dan looks at the roads just to see if conditions have changed dramatically, that things need to get moved around. I know Jeff and Bob might be willing to go for gravel roads back.
Hey,
I don't think
Dan,
Glacier's far off from being a gravel road.
Dan, question on Savoy Court, the utility portion of that, is that needed now? Or is that something that could make it to 24? We're just kicking the can down the road again. If we don't know what 24 is gonna look like yet.
Yeah, so that's a weird pipe. It was like a pipe that had some sort of insert put in it, as near as I can tell. And it's structurally sound. It just has a half dozen spots in it that have some pretty bad water leakage coming into it.
Okay.
So, that's why it's shallow. So it's probably got river water coming into it. And, that's something that, like, the first year of televising 6 years ago, that I recognized that. So that's why I put that on our list. Is it critical that it get done this year? No.
Okay.
It'll certainly survive. There's no chance there's always a chance, but there's very little chance of that sanitary sewer failing.
Okay.
Unlike Prospect, which is in terrible condition.
We just don't want to do the road and then 3 years from now
Yeah.
have to tear it up because people get real upset about that.
Although the hazard of river water going into the sewer system is we're paying for treating that at the treatment plant on the downside.
Can I jump back? HVAC, we have it broken into 3 years, but I'm assuming all of the pieces that we're looking to replace were all put in at the same time?
Correct.
Did we just break it up just so we didn't have a $170,000 bill? to pay,
Yeah, I think
or-
that was the thought process when we got the plan, was to spread out the pain over time.
Okay, all right. I guess that's something to consider too, but, and we're looking mostly for just thoughts and direction, right?
Yeah, and the infrastructure items, the funds proposed for infrastructure, yeah, just some direction on that so we can, if, for instance, if the LED and the furnaces are something you're interested in moving forward with, we can move forward to try and get some bid numbers, so we've got real dollars that we're working with versus estimates.
Okay. Well, let me share a couple of thoughts and then see who agrees or disagrees with it. But as I was going through this, kind of my first thought was, let's try and minimize the use of kind of general funding that would be just attached to the property tax rate. Let's try and minimize that. And to me, to do that means a couple of things. One is utilize the utilities as much as possible. So, for example, with the transportation, with borrowing the 1.151, which is all for roads, have the debt service of that paid out of the transportation utility. And again, it's because otherwise the homeowner is picking up the biggest share of the cost, whereas with the utility, it's being spread out over all the properties. And as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, we've got about 30% of the village is tax exempt. So we need all the properties helping to pay for that. For the other items, though, the infrastructure fund has had a significant increase over the past year. I mean, there's I think an addition of like 300,000 to it. At 1.2 million, it's got a fair amount of money in it. So I would say, we can lean on that a little bit more for some of those. And if we do get additional shared revenues based on some of the preliminary numbers, if we end up getting that, then I guess potentially redirect some of the ARPA funds we had earmarked for this year for some of those things. So in doing all that, I mean, I'm actually looking at it as, let's keep the borrowing primarily for the roads, in my opinion. So, if we're saying the 53,000 that you've earmarked here for the water and sewer utilities, that's fine. I guess I would wonder, is it possible that the sewer repairs to Kiwanis Park, could would that be under the sewer utility, or instead of being a separate item? I don't know if, because it's a park, it's handled differently or not, but I would suggest we look at that, keep it within the utility if we can. But then frankly, use the infrastructure fund, because if I add up all the items that we've listed here, everything from the bucket truck, again, because it's gonna take 2 years to get it. So why borrow now and then not have it for a while, where we could take out the infrastructure fund, the different payments we have to make over the next couple of years. The weed conveyor, you still want the lift truck, right? Yeah, 14,000 for that. Just these other things, I mean, if I added it up right, I think we're at like, 550,000 for all of those. We could take it out of the infrastructure fund, it would still leave like 800,000 in that fund, but we're not paying interest on it, we're not adding to the tax rolls. And the reason why I asked about the HVAC is, unless we're, confident that we're not gonna have problems with the systems over the next couple of years, are we better off just doing it all, then, and instead of piecing it together, like I said, until we get bids, we don't know what those options might actually look like, but anyway, I guess I'm more for, because the interest rates are higher than they were a couple of years ago, is to use the money for a lot of those kinds of things, and limit the borrowing for the actual roads, and that could be kept within the utility. So those are my opinions.
Any other comments? Scott, do you need a direction on this, or?
Well, I guess just for clarity, and I want Brad to address the interest rate and the financing form, but so the utilities, like the water utility, sewer utility, stormwater, would be paying their proportionate shares for the projects. So with regard to I think it's 267,000 for road projects, are you looking for that to be borrowed but paid back through the transportation utility?
Okay, so the 1.151 million, that's for all those things, sewer, stormwater, road repair, everything?
And water, correct. As well as there's other projects related to the Quinlan Tower, the Kottmeyer lift station, although most of that's next year. So there are some sanitary sewer components. So that's, the 1.15 is all utility and roads.
Right.
And you get the 300,000 for the bucket truck, which was just brought in for discussion for financing versus debt. I guess I'm just trying to make sure I'm understanding the direction on the borrowing components.
And maybe I misread how with that dollars, but what was suggested here in terms of the net amount that we would have to borrow, that 1,151,000, if it's made up of work that involves several different utilities, I would say still take out the debt, but separate the servicing out of each one respectively.
Okay.
Do we have to make a decision on the bucket truck now? Because they're not requiring a deposit or anything. Can
Well,
we just give it go ahead and then
yeah, I think
figure out what's the dollar?
we'll get the bids, just so we know, and then bring that back to the board for authorization, and then we'll know once we get the bids as.
Also, unless you'd like to give us the thumbs up right now.
I've seen your bucket truck. It needs to be replaced.
Yeah, so, so we got,
Yeah, and there's no action
Yeah.
for anything tonight, just direction.
so we've been working with two different companies to try to get proposals. We just got the one, it's for 298 and change. We're still working with the other one. Their proposal is good until June 8th. I guess my thing is gonna be that if the other company doesn't get us a proposal by the end of next week, to be ready for the next board meeting, I'm gonna bring you the proposal that we have for approval. Because we've been messing around with these bucket truck people for like a year and a half. Yeah.
So that truck in front of you is a truck that they built in 2020 for Milwaukee County or City of Milwaukee, one of the two. And that's a very similar unit to what we're proposing having built. So it'll be 55-foot reach, chipper box on the back, saws on the boom, safety lights, work lights, etc.
Chipper
Does it have to
box.
be yellow?
No,
I
that's,
believe it'll be white.
I'd say that's Milwaukee, for sure.
Except it'll cost another $300 for that.
Okay, so I think I'm
So-
understanding the
Yeah.
financing components.
Right, we borrow that amount for those long-term infrastructure projects. We have debt service paid out of each
Correct.
utility accordingly, as opposed to just general debt going onto the tax rolls.
Correct.
Yeah. That would be my recommendation. And like I say, the other things, I think, we have quite a bit of money, and depending on what happens with our state legislature, we might have some more. And I would just say, limit the debt on those things and use the cash that we have.
How much do we outside of what's being earmarked for the DPW building, out of transportation utility, what are we typically putting into the fund then after the DPW?
I think for operations and maintenance, we're around the 250,000.
We have some allocations for staff, both from the DPW and administration, and all the costs that go with that, as well as some of these actual projects and things.
Right,
you know.
that's what I was just
Yeah.
wondering what we're putting in there.
But we do that with all the utilities, we have allocations.
Yeah, the 250 is not including the debt service for the new building, which hit this year.
Mhm.
Not including.
That's not including that, correct? I think that number was maybe under 20,000 for that. Don't quote me on that, but. If the board is ready to, then Brad's here to talk about financing options, just to give us a kind of lay of the land and what makes sense, I guess, yeah.
Sure, yeah. There's a few, well, the village's typical practice has been to issue 15 to 20-year debt to fund this infrastructure type projects. And then with the allocations back to the utilities, we can provide separate debt schedules for that. With the dollar amount we're talking about, sounds like about 1.15 million. That's a relatively small issue size for a 15 to 20-year issue. So another option that Scott and I have been discussing is placing this with a bank for a short-term loan, really an interim financing, for maybe a 12 to 18-month period. And then when you consider your 2024 capital budget and your capital financing plan, roll that short-term issue into one larger bond issue. The result, you have one bond that covers the 2 years of projects. You've got some cost savings. The cost to place debt with a bank is less than an open market issue, primarily because you don't have to pay for a bond rating from Moody's. And you'll get more efficiencies with having a larger bond issue out in the market next year in terms of better bids, better interest rates relative to the market than you would by going out to market with a relatively small issue. The risk is you don't get very good interest rate bids, or you get fewer bids than you would with a larger issue. Either approach will work. We could still directly go ahead and issue the long-term bonds. I'm just concerned that there's a more efficient, process that you could take by issuing a short-term bank loan. In terms of the bucket truck, with the discussion why the state trust fund was brought up is the bucket truck is not eligible to be financed with a debt longer than 10 years that's initially issued for new projects. Hypothetically, if you decided to, and there's no reason to finance that bucket truck now if you don't have to pay for it for 18 months, but if you find a proposal comes in where they do need funds up front, we could roll that bucket truck financing into a bank loan also. It'd be the same bank loan as your infrastructure. Then when we come back next year, the village could issue what's called a refunding bond. It's a refinancing of the short-term debt. Now that bucket truck is eligible to be a part of that refunding bond. So that's an approach that you, again, have one issue instead of multiple issues to fund a bucket truck standalone and infrastructure standalone. So there's just a few options wanted to bring to your attention. The most efficient or more efficient option is going to be a bank loan if you decide to finance the 1.15 million. More efficient would be a bank loan, come back next year and do the long-term debt.
Scott, I have a question. In years past, we've always done a 3-year debt, looked at
Yes.
3 years of spending,
Yeah,
and now we're looking at 1 year only.
correct, and that's because the dollar amounts that we're looking at for 24 and 25, I forget what the threshold is, if you hit X number of debt issuance, your time frame to spend those funds is shorter.
It's $5 million. It's a dollar amount. So less than $5 million issued in a calendar year gives the village 3 years to spend those funds on capital projects. Once you exceed 5 million, then you're limited to 2 years, and there's spend down tests along the way every 6 months.
And next year, if you look at the 2024 column, right now, we're estimating about 5.8 million for projects, and the bulk of that is the HMO treatment facility for well number 4. So with that tighter time frame for spend down, we're not going to hit that if we borrow 23 and 24 this year. Because we're not even at the point of finishing the design for the HMO treatment facility until mid to latter part of this year, and then bid it out and then get on a construction schedule for somebody to do that in 2024. And you also need to apply for PSC approval for that type of project because we're over the dollar threshold for that type of work.
Well, that's what you're saying, Brad, is, if we're looking at 5 to 6 million next year and we have a 1.5 this year, we're beyond that threshold where then the bonds, it can be rolled together. Okay.
Yeah. And if you look historically, the village's issue amounts have been closer to that $5-8 million range, and you've gotten really good bids. This approach, I don't have the year in front of me, but we did do a private placement, a bank loan for a TIF project. I think it might have been 2019 or so. So this is an approach that you've used in the past.
And any forecasts on how bonds are looking in the next year?
Well, we're really at a high watermark on interest rates right now. So the rates have been lower more often than they've been higher. So I can't predict where they'll be a year from now, but hopefully they're not higher.
I should have asked Dan this before the meeting, but the 2025 projects, looks like it comes out to about 2 million and change. I'm looking at this right.
Yeah, 2.7 million.
2.7. Is there any way of doing 25 and 23 this year? No?
We don't have plans for those projects even designed. So I think by the time those plans would be designed, we'd be into the winter season.
They just looking because
And currently, we have both the Kopmeyer lift station replacement and well number 4 treatment system under design right now for 24 likely construction.
We already borrowed for the treatment plant on Kopmeyer, though.
That's a lift station on Kopmeyer.
Oh, it's the lift station, yeah.
is that because Glacier is listed in 2025? Is that just a coincidence, or?
Get the money now, spending more.
Yeah, where's Park Avenue? How about, we also rolled 2029 into that too?
Those Glacier and Capital or Wisconsin, how you want to look at it, those are a little complicated because there's a lot of sanitary sewer help that's needed there. I don't recall the age of the water mains. Are you looking at the CIP? Is there water main on there? I don't recall.
Glacier or?
So yeah, that's what I thought. So that's a lot. there's a lot more upfront work that has to be done there than just going in there and pulverizing and repaving the road. There's a bunch of utility work that has to happen there too.
So is the bank placement something the board is willing to look at for the financing for the 23 projects?
I have an expert that's telling me that's the best way to go.
Well, it makes
Trust the
sense.
expert.
It makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Yep, just want to make sure I got the
Yeah.
consensus of the board before we presume what that's what we were thinking it was going to be, but obviously it's the board's direction that we're looking for.
And all joking aside, with the 2025 in Glacier, I'm also not opposed to just thinking of, is there ways to expand it, to roll more projects and get them out of the way, but yes, in regards to that, yes.
I think once we get rid of some of the, or get through, not rid, some of the major utility projects, then I think in the future, there might be some capability to take on more road projects, but I don't want to speak for Dan.
Those are big numbers for a little place with not a lot of staff. I can tell you, a lot bigger communities that aren't spending $2 or $3 or $4 million a year on projects. So, I think the CIP I put together is, kind of aggressive, which is why I spread out some of those numbers that I did, which is why unfortunately you see things like Main Street and Prospect and Glacier kind of pushed out. I mean, there's only so much that we can tackle in a year, along with, the everyday things. It's a hard enough work just getting through every day, much less all the big picture stuff. You laugh, but.
Well, the quicker we get to having them fully redone, the less you guys are out there filling potholes and, that stuff, so.
Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments as it relates to this particular item? Scott, you have enough information to move forward?
Yes, I didn't get a lot of notes, but I heard Cassie clicking away to help me remember.
We can watch it again. I mean, it's right there.
Yes.
Thank you.
Then we'll go on to discussion and possible action on 2023 road and utility project contract award. Dan?
Okay, so this contract award is for our utilities and road replacement project for this year. So this is mill and paves on Concord and Meadow Creek Court. So that's another section of the Willow Grove area repaved. The removal and replacement of the alley here behind Village Hall, which I call the Oakton Alley. And a substantial part of Hickory east of Forest Grove, which there's probably no piece of asphalt over there that's bigger than about this. So that's a full depth pulverization and a repave. And then what I have in there is two primarily sanitary sewer replacement projects in Savoy Court and on Prospect between Maine and Wisconsin. And each of those has a storm sewer component. One of the reasons why Prospect is more expensive is after the survey and the design, and we looked at the sewer video, we figured out that there is a sewer lateral that's going underneath one of the storm sewer structures out there. So we moved the storm sewer structure, but then we realized that where the existing one goes across, on gravity utilities, you generally have a structure of some nature at every intersection of pipes. In this case, the pipe goes across the street and there's no structure there. There's probably some sort of T or something where we don't have any way to see it. So that meant that we had to add a pipe across the street with another structure. And when I conceived that project, all I was thinking of is we were going to have to do a couple of rebuilds of the tops of some structures. So that became a lot more expensive. Also, our bids came in a little bit higher than we thought. My original numbers that were in the CIP were $929,500. RE Smith did an estimate more recently in April, and without engineering costs, they came up with $770. And you understand that the estimates I do in the CIP are pretty, I mean, I have about 6 items that I do to come up with these numbers. I mean, they had, 50, I don't even know how many, 2 pages of items that they looked at the unit prices of recent bids. So they were way more off than I was. We got 3 bids, May 10th. Our low bidder was Wolf Paving, $1,037,499.85. They worked for us before. They did the 2021 project, which was a number of things, but primarily it was a lot of mill and pave in the Willow Grove area. I can finally get them now to do the one punch list item that's remaining. That project remains open because there's a piece of sidewalk that I've been hassling for a year and a half to do. So if they're awarded this, that's going to be the first thing they're going to do finally, and we can close that project. As I indicated in my memo, if you want to get closer to what that original CIP estimate was, my recommendation would be to postpone the Savoy Court project, which had sanitary sewer replacement of the pavement, and then we had a couple of storm sewer structures in there that we were going to replace as well, which that part of the project would be about $174,000. So, any questions?
I'm saying leave it in. Get it done.
The $1,037,000, that includes Savoy right now?
Yes.
And we already borrowed money for this. This is from funds that we did earlier, right?
But there are some funds, if you look on the spreadsheet, there's use of unspent funds. Yeah, those are funds from prior borrowing, so there's probably some left over from this project as well as other road projects, yeah.
But if we, in using this for those unspent funds, part of that was calculated to get down to the 1.15 million, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was this taken into account when we were doing those numbers?
Yeah, my spreadsheet was updated when we got the bid numbers in, and the unspent funds are current estimates based on project tracking.
Okay, so we're not talking about new funds borrowing, we're talking about existing funds.
We are looking at, for road projects, new funding of about $267,000 that's needed.
Okay.
Any
That's
other
part of what we
questions?
just talked about, right?
Yeah, the 1.151, yeah.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to award Wolf Paving for the contract for $1,037,499 to complete these improvements.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Just a reminder for the board, these are unit-based contracts, so it's based on estimates for tonnage for stone and blacktop and all that stuff. So it could be less, and hopefully not more.
Thank you. I usually make that disclaimer that you understand these are unit price bid contracts, so you pay by the units installed. You might be over, you might be under. We're actually I wouldn't say significantly. We're quite a bit under on the East Wisconsin project, which isn't closed out either. We still owe one final payment on that, but I think we're going to come in probably 100,000 under on that one.
Is that being striped soon?
It is. It was done early last week, I think. Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is hereby granted. Discussion and possible action regarding best use possible action on professional services agreement for 2023 road and utility improvement project construction services.
Our design services agreement that we have with RA Smith is just for doing design and bid services up to the point of receiving bids.
So what I've been doing is, at the point of award of a contract, I get another proposal amendment for construction services, which is going to include putting the contracts together, a pre-construction conference, doing the construction staking, that's having the surveyors out there, construction observation, and then, of course, there's administrative costs, somebody supervises the inspectors, if there's design changes, or we need a field meeting, that sort of thing, I'll have my person from R.A. Smith there. So in this case, including all these projects, they came up with a services proposal estimated at $65,000, which is $10,500 for surveying, $41,500 for inspection services, and $13,000 for management and administration costs. I didn't do the math. I think this is around 6% of the total project cost. So I think well within what's typical. When I do my estimates for a project in general, I usually use about 15% for outside consulting services between design and construction services.
Are there any questions or comments that relates to this topic? If there are none, I'll look for a motion then.
Motion to approve the professional services agreement for 2023 with R.A. Smith at a total cost estimated $65,000.
Robert, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Again, motion is hereby carried. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Is Dan,
Item D.
is Dan leaving before we compliment and admire the beautiful downtown crosswalks?
Yeah, well, we were just talking about that, so we just used traffic paint on that, and it's kind of, it was done in the middle of the night, temperatures were cool, it was 2 coats. We have a bunch of the paint left over, so at some point, we're probably gonna give it some additional coats. You can already see where the tire lanes are, that's kind of wearing already, which I kind of expected. Maybe if we can get some additional paint down with better weather conditions, it might be more durable. We'll see. It's a work in progress.
I think it looks great.
I think we might try some reflective glass beads in it with this next round of paint as well.
Big improvement.
Thank you. Discussion and possible action regarding best use criteria for Class B intoxicating liquor, fermented malt beverage establishments, and waiting lists. Who wants to take this, Scott?
I'll
Or
start.
Cassie, pardon me.
Sure. I know it was mentioned at a past board meeting, maybe getting a waiting list or something like that. I kind of reached out to some people in the city of Oconomowoc, said that they don't have a waiting list. It's actually in their ordinances. And they have a best use criteria, which I included in the packet for you guys. And then Attorney Blum had emailed out some suggestions. Hopefully you guys read through those, but basically one, determining what criteria would be most preferred, if we can kind of walk through that. And then do we want to do a publication, or how do we want to get out that, we have a license at the event, maybe we would get one. Maybe putting in the ordinance that we don't keep a waiting list, and also put in there that the business must be open within a certain amount of time, or we could also revoke a license that, I don't know, if the business closes or whatever the case might be. So if you want to talk about that, it'd be great.
And Bob?
Yeah, I think it's real important to realize that we're going to have hopefully a commodity that there's going to be some demand for. Problem is, we can only do it 2 ways. One is population growth, so we might get 1, maybe 2 if we fill out some additional areas of population, and then the opportunity is buying them outright from a surrounding community. So either way you look at it, we're going to be very limited on what we're going to have available, even over the next 10 or 15 years, okay? We need to be very strategic in our approach on this, and I think the first thing we need to do is understand what our vision is. Okay, right now we could, we could make decisions and, okay, well, if somebody wants to put a building up and he wants to have a bar in there, let's give it to him. Problem is, we don't know what the upside and what the vision is overall when it comes to the overall downtown triangle, Capitol Drive, Ryan Street. The Planning Commission has put, parameters based off of the land use, but still, I think it's important for us to at some point talk about what our vision is for 2030. What do we want to see? And then create our criteria and go forward. Because what we think is going to be important right now, a year from now, it might not be, because there's another option that came up and we're going, we should have considered that. So I guess what I'm saying is we shouldn't rush into this. Okay? We should spend some time and be strategic in our approach. And I agree with everything that Mark said, by the way, in his letter, too.
Yeah, the Oconomowoc criteria, it didn't seem like, I don't understand how they're using this criteria at all. If it's point-based or what's the best and worst, I can't tell.
Yeah, I don't know, I kind of took it as the top going down. I mean, obviously you'd want a full-service restaurant versus a cafe, I'd say, to take up a full license. I mean, that was kind of my take on it, but maybe I'm wrong. You'd want more seating versus less seating. That was the way I took it, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything Bob said in terms of not rushing into it. I was not crazy about the wait list idea, just because, again, anyone could jump on it. Hell, I'll put my name on it, and if one comes available, I'll come up with an idea for it. I wasn't crazy about that. Agreed with Attorney Blum's recommendation, especially because we've had it in the past where somebody has gotten a license and sat on it for a year and nothing came to fruition. I would say best case scenario, we see 2 in our lifetime if they don't change anything in regards to the criteria of how we get them. So yes, they are going to be a commodity. Anything we put forward, I think, needs to be basically where we're given the option or the input and where it is gone, where it goes to. The first come first serve worked for a while where their supply outweighed our demand, but now, yeah, I agree, Bob. We need to have some say in this, because we know, as seeing kind of what other people from outside our community have presented about what we could possibly be downtown, we need to take a strategic approach to where these licenses go, because it's definitely going to be a hot commodity.
Great, I agree. How do we arrive at that criteria?
Well, do we put this in with our strategic plan that Craig wants us to revisit? Should that be encompassed in that, and then wait for the proposal or the presentation that we're gonna have from UW? I don't know if that fits in.
That's not. Well, I mean,
So-
that gives you, the
That's
capstone
more-
project gives you like a big general idea.
Right.
Yeah, but obviously us as citizens kind of have an idea of what businesses
Correct.
specifically. So I feel like, developing a criteria for this could go into a 2-hour discussion that could possibly only affect 1, maybe 2 future businesses, so.
It's also not a tremendous rush.
Correct. I don't know how much we want to punch ourselves in the face in a 2-hour conversation amongst ourselves.
Yeah, it isn't something we can even start to talk about
Correct.
right now.
Right.
And the UW cap thing is a piece to look at. I think it's pie in the sky,
Yeah.
but I think it's also another thing to consider as we look forward to the future. But also it helps you start to think about the downtown triangle. Again, when you're looking at West Wisconsin with Oakton and Capitol Drive and thinking about that, and if we only have 1, 2, possibly 3 in the future, how is that going to affect it? But then we also have Ryan Street, we also have Capitol Drive, and considerations there also. So we've got, and we don't know what the future is going to bring, and we need to talk through that a little bit before we lay out these criteria, because these criteria are, you know, wouldn't work in the village here, the way they're laid out right now. You know, so I look at it as taking a strategic look, building a picture of the future, but then we also got to keep an eye on, okay, what, is there any work we can do on the ordinance now to get that done? But also start thinking about that criteria part. But all of those pieces have to be a consideration. And like I said, it isn't something that's going to happen quickly. And I think our strategic plan, again, and the work we're doing on that is a good piece to have going at the same time. I just don't think we should do anything and rush into anything when it comes to these criteria.
I guess where that leads us, though, or leaves us, I should say, is what does it default back to? So let's say we do have somebody come forward with a business idea. What do we default to in the meantime until we develop criteria or develop, you know, or a Class B liquor license ordinance type thing, or where are we at?
Well, thankfully, we don't have a license to give them.
That is true.
But if a restaurant closes tomorrow,
Correct. So I'm saying, so we're, you know, just like with the transient license, like if we didn't pass something, it reverts back to, you know, the least strict type thing. So what does this revert back to? Are we still on the first come, first served basis if we don't pass something?
I think that's true. The reality of the situation is that you're probably going to have a business that decides to close or sell, and they are probably going to be in mid-year in terms of their license at some point. And what usually happens is they say, we agree to turn in our license so long as the village agrees to reissue it to whomever the new purchaser or new operator is. So that's the way that usually goes down. It's not likely that you're going to see a bar that's probably going to be demolished and just kind of go out of use, so to speak, and then become available for the village to assign elsewhere, just because those licenses are just way too valuable. It's likely going to be a redevelopment of an existing location, but you know, it could happen that way, but not very likely. Make sense?
Yeah, but if we still have a new business that comes in, you know, is someone going to be hurt or whatever, because we didn't put together a wait list in the meantime or anything like that? Like
It would, yeah. So right now you don't have a license and we don't have a formal policy of creating a wait list. So Cassie, I assume if somebody called you tomorrow, you'd say we don't have a wait list because we don't have any licenses available. And you're just gonna have to wait, you know, until that situation changes.
So then can we, at this point, because it's possible action, I mean, can we pass something that basically just supersedes everything, just says until we develop a criteria, until we, whatever, it's all liquor licenses are requiring board approval?
Well, they
Well, they do anyways.
Well, opposed to first come, first served, you know?
Well,
Because right now, it's basically, if, let's say we do have one available, if someone comes in front of us and says they want it, as long as they're not selling liquor at a meth house, you know, like we go, okay, great, yeah, we have one, you got it, you want it, go for it, you're gonna pay for it? We've never actually screwed.
you're right. And I think part of my heartburn is I would like to see something in your ordinance that says, here's what the board is going to do in terms of the evaluation, simply going beyond the application itself and whether, you know, there's other legal reasons that you shouldn't give it to somebody. But if you want to put more constraints along the lines of what Bob was just saying, you really need to have that in your ordinance. Now, that maybe it means that the criteria themselves are evolving over time, but I think you need something in your ordinance to say is, you know, this is what the board's going to look at. There's no guarantee that if you submit an application that you're going to get a license, even if you're the only one that's applying. So my preference would be to kind of answer, I think the question you're trying to ask is, to have something on the books, giving that discretion to the village board at this point, and maybe you don't put the criteria in, you know, in the text of the ordinance, although I'd kind of like to see it there, but maybe you just reference it as an attachment that is available through the clerk's office, which just evolves over time. But what I'm also hearing is there's a plan commission element or maybe a comp plan, amendment element to say you might have, economic improvement zones in the village, that you have a certain area of the downtown or Ryan Street or whatever it might be as areas that the village board considers as prime for, a new establishment of some sort. And so that would be another criteria that if you're in one of these zones, that, you're more likely to get your application adopted.
Do we have ability to limit liquor licenses to said zones? Can we basically earmark them for specific zones?
I guess I would say yes, but I think problem is we don't know what's going to come down the way and so I would rather have that be, and like if you looked at the notes, it said you establish what the significance is of any of these individual criteria. So maybe if it's in an economic zone, that gets you 20 points, where if you, have certain other criteria, maybe it's only 5 points. So that in essence, you've prioritized it that way. But if you get something that knocks your socks off, that's outside the improvement zone, maybe you go ahead and do that. That's why you wanted that flexibility. So they're going to have to come in and wow you with what they're intending to do.
Well, what do we do about an existing business that has just a beer and wine, and now we have a liquor license, and they go, oh, I really wanted the liquor license. How are we going to say to him, well, here's the criteria, and even though you've been in business for umpteen years, maybe we're going to hold on to this because this might happen over here. You don't meet the criteria.
I guess
I think that's a possibility.
The problem,
I know it is, because I know one.
The criteria also is, what are you comparing it to? Like, it's one thing if we have 6 businesses going for one license and we could all rate them and rank them and be like, oh, what's the best fit? But if we only have one person coming for it, it's like, yeah, your score of 4 is the high score right now. We have nothing to say, well, but this other one of 72 is a better option. It's kind of like, how do we just deny it just to say, well, you only scored this much out of our criteria. And they go, okay, well, who did I have to beat out? And we go, good point.
Well, what I will tell you at the time that happens is I'd like you to make a record of what it is. And here's the reason why that you would have it be a notice that be published, and you give a deadline for people to submit.
I like that.
And so everybody then is kind of on equal footing in terms of submission. It's not like you got to have a race to the village clerk's office. But then once you decide which one it is, you're going to say, that you evaluated all the applications that were received, and that we reviewed our criteria and the recommendations that have been made for, where economic improvement would be benefited by having one of these kind of establishments. And here are the elements of this application which we felt as if, were most appropriate and would be the best fit for the village. And so you put in the record why it is that you believe, rather than saying it's somebody's got 15 points and somebody else has got 10, you basically say, what about the application was impressive to you and made you decide to do it. But the flip side of that is if you only get one application and it's for doing what Jeff just mentioned, maybe you look at that and just say, we're underwhelmed and it really doesn't satisfy a majority of the criteria we have, and as a result, we're not going to issue that license right now, and we're going to put it back out there 6 months from now or something like that and revisit it, because I don't think you're under an obligation to issue it just because you can.
Okay.
Do we have a guess based off of developments that are in the funnel right now? Where will we meet that needed population growth for the state to give us one without having to go out and purchase?
Need 300 more.
300 more.
300 more people. So
Pretty big development.
so let's see. That didn't include St. Mary's property. Doesn't include in Kirkland Expands, and it doesn't include the nursing home that was approved over on 164, and it doesn't include Riverside.
Right.
So if all those come to fruition, we should have another liquor license somewhere around 2027.
Mark your calendars, it's exciting.
No, probably 20, I mean, to get
Could be
300,
26.
26, I would say, because I guess it all depends on River Hills, and then the St. Mary's would, I mean, that's near completion, so that's got to at least be a couple hundred people.
80 people, probably.
Yeah, I figured 2
Something like
people
that.
per home. I think
Yeah,
it's-
there's each have about 40, roughly 40
I
lots.
was thinking 3, but I guess I was wishful thinking, but,
I think mainly empty nesters up there, I'm guessing.
okay. So yeah, I guess we're at least a couple years out. However, I know it was discussed with Attorney Blum. When I talked to the Department of Revenue, it was written as part thereof, and I was shown it in to where you could pull it early. We have to explore that further. It was actually documented. I saw it with my own eyes. Special Agent Aaron Dorn, who her and I have a very, very intimate relationship. And
You
not
get
in
a
good
Christmas
way.
card from her every year, don't you?
What's that?
You get a Christmas card from her every year?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think she still has the voodoo doll of me, but she showed it specifically to me in writing, so I just have to relocate that.
Okay.
So do we want to go further with this, or should we bring this back with some
Well,
more
if-
ideas, maybe
If-
Want to
touch
see a
this
draft
more?
ordinance at this point?
Yeah, see a draft ordinance. I think that
Cassie
would
is
be the
saying,
best
I hope
way.
so.
Something to respond to would be helpful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, if we want to kind of work on more details for, you know, what the criteria is and so forth, and we want to make that part of the strategic plan process, that really won't be in place until the end of this year. So I don't know if you're looking at an ordinance change as a stopgap, or if someone wants to carry the ball and start it before then. Because, I mean, realistically, we're not going to have an update to the strategic plan until the end of the year.
Well, if you have the ordinance in place, you can always amend it at a future date based on future outcomes.
And we're probably gonna be more vague about what those criteria are until you guys decide. You know, we're just gonna say that it's gonna benefit the economic vitality of the village of Pewaukee and, you know, protect the public health and safety, all the good, normal stuff we put in.
I just want something in writing that basically says that it's discretionary, it will be announced, it'll be publicly announced, and then there's a timeline of when it has to be fulfilled. Like, so that's the bare minimum of what I would like to see drafted immediately, so that we have some say and some urgency with it.
we have to have some meat in this, because we've got to, when we're going to say no to somebody and give it to somebody else, there has to be some very good reasons in there, because we do not need to have any liability lawsuits type of situation where, let's just say, again, using there's a business already, but because you're lower in the way we criteria this one here has got more, but it's not here yet, so we're gonna give it to them. There's gotta be a really good, sound reason why we're not doing it, not just because, well, you're too small, but you're gonna be really big, so we're gonna give it to them. I just happened to see that happen in another community, and they came real close to a big-time lawsuit. So I just don't want that. I want it in black and white. This is what we're gonna do, and when you get it, this is the reason. And I think Mark can do that.
Challenge accepted?
Yeah, exactly.
We have faith in you.
Lots. For 18 years.
So we'll bring this back after we see something.
Yeah, and I think it's important that as we go forward with looking at some of the more strategic thoughts that we're going to be bringing, whether it's the UW project, whether it's, you know, strategic planning overall, that's all part of the focus around these criteria too.
Okay, we're gonna go to alcohol license. We have a temporary Class B license approval. Are there any questions or comments as to the way that is presented this evening?
Real quick, do we need to take action on the last one?
No.
We got
I'm
direction
gonna
to
put
come back.
an ordinance together and bring it back, so that's the direction I've received.
Okay, is there Any questions or comments? If not, a motion?
Motion to approve the temporary Class B beer retailer's license application made by the Pewaukee Muskies amateur baseball team for 2023. Dates as listed.
Second, Rhodey.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the next one is I have 2 trustees for the Public Work Committee for 3 years. Chris Krasovich and Jim Grabowski. I would like to have them on the Public Works and Safety Committee, so I'll look for a motion to approve them for that.
Motion to approve?
Robert, second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, and then the Joint Library Board, Heather asked me to be on it, and I talked to Chris. Chris and Heather discussed it, and Chris, being the nice person she is, has relinquished her position on the board to Trustee Gergen. So I'd like to reappoint Trustee Gergen to the Library Board.
Question? I assume, Chris, you'll still be involved in the negotiations?
Yes.
Right, she's still there.
Yep. Make a motion to approve?
Second, Grabowski.
You have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, then we have the monthly approval of checks and invoices for all funds. I will look for a motion to approve all funds except for the library as presented. Nobody's going to make a motion?
Make a motion
Craig
to
had a
approve all
question,
funds.
sorry.
Yes, read this report. Refund it.
Second, Rhodey.
Yeah, we say no, what does it do?
No, I just thought Craig had a question. I was.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is hereby carried. Look for a motion to acknowledge the library checks and invoices.
Motion to acknowledge the library checks and invoices.
Second, Grabowski.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion again is hereby carried. There are no citizens here this evening, so I will not read the citizen comments. Item 10 is the adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, Roberts.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are hereby adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Hope you have a really good rest of your week.